Have you ever noticed how much our surroundings really influence like what we do every single day?
Yeah,
I mean, think about it, like a red light, that makes you stop your car, right?
right.
Or like the smell of coffee in the morning, it's like a little nudge to get you going. It's kind of crazy how our environment shapes our actions without us even like really thinking about it.
It's true. It's like we're on autopilot sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of what we're diving into today. It's all about stimulus control in applied behavior analysis, or ABA.
It's a fascinating area. It really gets to the heart of how we learn and adapt.
Stimulus control. Now, some of you might be thinking, hold on, isn't that like Psych 101 stuff? And you wouldn't be entirely wrong.
Right. It is rooted in those basic principles of behavior.
But it's honestly so much more than just theory.
Oh, absolutely.
It's like this core principle helps us really understand how we learn behaviors, like how those behaviors sting around.
And how we can create real change, meaningful change, both for ourselves and the people we work with.
Exactly, like lasting change. So in this deep dive, we're going to try to demystify stimulus control. We want to make it super clear what it is, why it's so important, and how ABA professionals use this knowledge like day in and day out.
That's the plan, to break it all down.
So we've got some great information that really unpacks those central ideas and the different ways we can approach building stimulus control, right?
Yeah, lots to explore.
So our mission today is to take some of these like really complex ABA concepts
Right.
and kind of translate them into practical, actionable insights that you can actually use, whether you're like a seasoned ABA pro, a caregiver, or just someone who's, fascinated by human behavior.
It's for everyone, really. Understanding these concepts can be so helpful on so many levels.
Okay, so let's dive in. First things first.
Yeah.
What exactly is simple stimulus control?
Okay, so simple stimulus control. At its core, it's about this idea that a specific behavior happens more often when a certain stimulus is present,
Okay.
because that behavior has been reinforced in the past, but only when that stimulus was around.
So it's like the stimulus is a cue, right?
It's a cue, a signal. It sets the stage.
That something good might happen if you do a certain thing.
Exactly. Like, think about a dog learning to sit when you say sit.
Oh, yeah, classic example.
The word sit, that's the stimulus.
Right.
It leads to the dog sitting, which is the behavior. Because in the past, sitting when they heard sit got them a treat or praise.
The good stuff.
Exactly, the reinforcement.
The reinforcement makes sense. So it's like an environment is kind of like dropping hints about what actions are going to get us those rewards, those good consequences.
Totally. It's a constant feedback loop. Let's look at some everyday examples to make it even clearer.
Okay, yeah, let's do that. Hit me.
Okay, how about your alarm clock?
Ugh, don't remind me.
That annoying sound in the morning, that's your stimulus.
I hit snooze like 5 times, though.
But eventually you get out of bed, right?
Okay, yeah, true. Most of the time.
And that's the behavior. Why? Usually to avoid being late for work, to avoid that stress.
Yeah, or missing that meeting.
Right. So the consequence of getting up, avoiding those negative things, that reinforces the whole getting out of bed response to the alarm.
It's like negative reinforcement. We're escaping that aversive sound and that possibility of being late.
Right on. It's all connected. Another one, think about your phone ringing.
Okay.
That sound makes you want to answer it, right?
Most times, unless it's an unknown number, then I'm like, oh, is it a telemarketer?
But you have that urge to answer, to connect with someone.
Yeah, that's true. And sometimes you even like know who's calling just by how the phone's ringing.
Absolutely. Hearing your friend's voice, that distinct sound pattern, that acts as a stimulus.
It's not just any voice. It's like their specific voice. It triggers instant recognition.
Exactly. It's those unique features that become associated with that person.
Okay, so what other examples do we have?
Let's see. You're in a crowded parking lot, right?
Okay, been there.
You see your car, you head straight to it. The visual features of your car, the make, the model, the color, they all act as stimuli.
And like the dents and scratches too, right?
Sure, all those little details that make it yours. Or think about when you're studying.
Okay.
You see the specific textbook you need, it's right there on your desk. You're more likely to pick it up and start reading. The book becomes a cue for that study behavior.
It's like the book is calling to you, like, read me, learn me.
In a way, yeah. Those visual cues are powerful.
Right, it's starting to see the pattern here. It's all about these learned associations.
Yeah, those connections we build over time.
And they guide our actions in so many ways.
Exactly. Even something like, oh, I don't know, seeing a muddy path after a rainstorm. You might decide to walk a longer way around, stick to the pavement.
Yeah, because who wants muddy shoes?
Right. So the muddy path, that's the stimulus that changes your usual walking behavior.
Interesting. And it works the other way around too, right? Like if you hear a weather forecast predicting sunny skies,
Exactly.
you might be less likely to grab your umbrella.
The forecast, that information, becomes the stimulus that influences your decision about the umbrella.
Fascinating stuff. So to sum it up, simple stimulus control is all about that learned relationship between a specific cue and a specific action. Now, you also mentioned this thing called simple discrimination contingency.
Yeah, that's the next layer, the next step.
How does that fit into this whole idea?
Well, a simple discrimination contingency really formalizes this whole relationship by defining the three key parts: the antecedent stimulus, which we call S, the behavior R, and the consequence C.
SRC, got it.
It's like a formula for understanding how these things connect.
So break that down for me. What exactly does that mean?
So in a simple discrimination contingency, a specific response, that's R, is reinforced but only when a particular stimulus is present. And we call that stimulus the discriminative stimulus, or ST.
Okay.
But here's the thing. That same response is not reinforced when a different stimulus is present. We call that one the S delta.
So the SD is kind of like the green light.
Right.
Saying, hey, go for it. Reinforcement is available if you do this specific thing.
Exactly.
And the S delta is like the red light. It's saying, nope, hold up. Doing that same thing here won't get you what you want.
You got it. Perfect analogy.
Okay, so can you give me a really clear example? Like, put this whole discrimination contingency into action.
Okay, let's go back to cookies.
Everyone loves cookies.
Imagine a child asks for cookies. That's the response.
Right.
Now, when the cookie jar is visual, that's your SD, the cue that cookies are available.
Okay.
The child asks, and they get a cookie. That's the reinforcement, the C.
Cookies are definitely reinforcing, especially for a kid.
But here's where the discrimination comes in. If the child asks for cookies, when the cookie jar is nowhere to be seen, that's the S delta.
The no cookie signal.
They don't get a cookie. Over time, what happens? The child learns to discriminate. They figure out that asking for cookies is more likely to work when that cookie jar is out, because that's when they've been successful in the past.
Because that's when they've gotten that sweet, sweet reinforcement.
Exactly. So the presence or absence of that cookie jar actually starts to control the behavior of asking for cookies.
That's so interesting. So it's not just about the behavior itself. It's about the context.
Yeah, the context is crucial. It provides those extra cues.
Now, moving beyond these kind of like direct stimulus-response relationships, let's talk about understanding concepts
Right.
and concept formation. Now, this might sound a bit more abstract,
It is a little more complex, yeah.
but it feels like this is a really huge part of how we make sense of the world around us.
Absolutely. Concepts are the building blocks of understanding. They help us organize and categorize information.
Okay, so define concept for me.
Think of it like this. A concept is a group of different stimuli that share some important features, even if they don't look exactly alike.
Okay,
And these shared features are what make us respond to them in the same way.
got it. So like a mental category.
Exactly. A mental category that helps us simplify things.
So concept formation is that process of learning to recognize those shared characteristics, right?
Right.
And then responding in a similar way to a whole bunch of different things that fit into that same category.
And also knowing when to respond differently to stimuli that don't fit. It's about discrimination, too.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So how does stimulus control play into all of this?
It's central, really. Through our experiences, we learn what aspect of a stimulus are important for categorizing it.
And then responding in the right way.
Right. The defining features of a concept start to control our behavior.
Okay, I think I get it, but can you give me a real-world example?
Okay, think about the concept of a chair.
A chair. Seems simple enough.
There are tons of different chairs, right? Armchairs, dining chairs, office chairs.
Beanbag chairs, rocking chairs.
Exactly. And they all look quite different, but you still know they're all chairs.
Yeah.
Why? Because they shared key features. They have a seat. They're designed for sitting. Most of them have a back.
That's the concept of chair.
Right. And those shared features are what control your response of calling it a chair or actually using it to sit.
You don't try to sit on a table even though it kind of has a flat surface?
No, because a table lacks those core features of a chair.
Okay, that really clarifies it. So concepts allow us to generalize our learning across all these different situations and objects that share those key characteristics.
Absolutely. It makes learning so much more efficient. Imagine if you had to learn about every single type of dog as if it were a completely new thing.
That would be exhausting.
Right. But you have this concept of dog.
Forelegs, tail, usually barks.
Exactly. So you can see a new breed of dog you've never encountered before.
And instantly you're like, oh, that's a dog.
And you know how to interact with it, more or less.
Yeah, because of that shared concept. Okay, so we've talked about simple stimulus control, how we form concepts. Now let's move into these things called conditional discriminations.
Right. Another important piece of the puzzle.
What makes them different, and why are they so crucial for, like, more complex types of learning?
So conditional discriminations add a layer of complexity, because the reinforcement you get for responding to a stimulus now depends on another stimulus being present.
Oh, okay, so it's not just a simple this stimulus, this response situation anymore.
Nope. The context, the other stimuli around, they matter now. It's like the meaning of one stimulus can change depending on what else is going on.
That's interesting. Can you give me an example to make that clearer?
Sure. Imagine you have a red block and a green block in front of you,
Okay, I'm picturing it.
and someone says, point to the green one.
Okay, easy enough.
The correct response, pointing to the green block, is conditional on that instruction, point to the green one.
Right.
If they had said point to the red one, then pointing to the red block would be the right response.
So the color green doesn't automatically mean point.
No, not always.
It's the instruction point to the green one that creates that connection.
Exactly. The instruction sets the occasion for how you should respond to the color.
I see. So the instruction provides the context that determines which response to that visual stimulus is going to get reinforced.
Precisely. The meaning is conditional.
Okay, that's a really important distinction. And you mentioned that conditional discriminations are super important for more advanced skills.
Yeah, they're like the foundation for a lot of higher level abilities.
Like what? Give me some examples.
Think about language comprehension. When someone says, put the big block on the small block,
Okay.
you need to understand the relationship between those words, like what on means in that context.
Right, to do the right action with the block.
Exactly. Or following multi-step instructions.
Oh, yeah, those can be tricky.
It involves a whole bunch of conditional discriminations. You have to respond to each step based on what came before.
And even understanding social cues, right?
Absolutely. Like knowing how to interpret someone's facial expression.
Or their tone of voice.
Right. You have to consider those things in light of what they're saying and the overall situation.
So it's all about reading those subtle cues and understanding the context. It's fascinating how much is going on beneath the surface.
It really is. Our brains are constantly making these connections.
Okay, so now let's talk about these match-to-sample procedures, or MTS.
MTS, yeah. It's a powerful tool.
What exactly are them, and how are they used to, study and teach these conditional discriminations?
Okay, matching to sample is a teaching technique where you basically set up a matching game.
Oh, okay.
You present a sample stimulus, and then the learner has to choose the matching stimulus from a set of comparisons.
So it's like find the match, but with a purpose.
Exactly. And the matching has to be based on a specific rule or relation that you've established.
So give me an example. How would a typical MTS trial work?
Okay, imagine you show someone a picture of a banana.
All right, a banana.
That's your sample stimulus.
Got it.
Then you present, say, 3 other pictures.
Okay.
Another banana, an apple, and an orange. The person has to pick the picture of the banana from that group because it matches the sample.
Find the banana.
If they choose correctly, they get reinforced.
Maybe with a real banana.
Maybe if that's what they like. Or a sticker, praise, whatever works for that individual.
So there are different types of MTS, right? Like simultaneous and delayed. What's the difference there?
Right. In simultaneous MTS, the sample and the comparisons are all visible at the same time. So the learner can look back and forth as they make their choice.
Okay.
But in delayed MTS, there's a short pause after the sample is removed before the comparisons show up.
So they have to remember the sample.
Exactly. It adds that memory component.
That's a good way to make it a bit more challenging, I guess.
It is. And it taps into different cognitive skills.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, this brings us to something that sounds super interesting and maybe a bit more complex.
Yeah, this one's a bit more conceptual.
It's this whole idea of stimulus equivalence and equivalence classes. What's that all about?
Stimulus equivalence is a powerful concept. It explains how we can learn relationships between things, even if no one directly taught us those specific relationships.
Oh, wow. So our brains are doing some extra work behind the scenes.
Exactly. It's like our brains can automatically figure out connections based on what we already know. Stimulus equivalence is demonstrated when someone shows these 3 specific untrained relationships: reflexivity, symmetry, and transitivity.
Okay, lots of new terms there. Let's unpack them one by one. So what's reflexivity in this context?
Reflexivity is the most basic. It's the ability to match something to itself without needing any prior training.
Okay, so if I see a picture of a red circle, I can match it to another identical picture of a red circle.
Exactly. It's like understanding A equals A.
It seems obvious.
It is, but it's a fundamental building block for all these other relationships.
It's like a foundation.
Right. Now let's move on to symmetry.
Okay, symmetry.
Symmetry is about the reversibility of a relationship. So if you've been taught that stimulus A, let's say a picture of a cat, goes with stimulus B, the written word cat.
Okay, I'm following.
Then symmetry means you also understand that stimulus B, the written word cat, goes with stimulus A, the picture, without anyone explicitly teaching you that.
So the relationship goes both ways.
Right. It's reciprocal.
Got it. If I know this image means cat, I also know that the word cat refers to this image.
Precisely. It's 2 sides of the same coin.
All right, and the last one, transitivity. What's that about?
Transitivity is where it gets really interesting. It's about combining 2 learned relationships to understand a third, brand new one.
Okay, so If I know A goes with B and B goes with C,
Then you automatically understand that A goes with C.
even if no one ever taught me that directly.
Exactly. It's like a mental shortcut.
Wow, that's pretty amazing.
It is. It's how we build these complex networks of knowledge.
So if I learn that a picture of a cat goes with the written word cat,
Mm-hmm.
and then I learn that the written word cat goes with the spoken word cat.
Then through transitivity, you would also understand that the picture of the cat goes with the spoken word cat.
Even though I never made that connection directly.
That's the power of transitivity. It allows us to learn so much more than what we're explicitly taught.
That's a much more efficient way to learn.
For sure, it's like our brains are constantly looking for patterns and connections.
And you said these stimuli that demonstrate all three of these properties, reflexivity, symmetry, and transitivity.
They form what we call an equivalence class.
An equivalence class, what does that mean exactly?
An equivalence class is basically a group of stimuli that are treated as the same because they're related together through these equivalence relations.
Okay, so in our cat example,
Yeah.
the picture of the cat, the written word cat, and the spoken word cat, they all become part of the same equivalence class.
Exactly. To the learner, they become interchangeable in a functional sense.
So it's not just memorizing specific pairings, it's like understanding the underlying concept that connects them.
Exactly. It's a deeper level of learning.
Okay, so this is all really fascinating, but how does this apply to ABA in the real world? What are the benefits of using these stimulus equivalence teaching methods?
Well, the advantages are pretty significant. One of the biggest is that it can make instruction way more efficient.
How so?
You don't have to teach every single relationship directly. You teach a few key connections.
And then boom, all these other relationships emerge on their own.
Right. It can save a lot of time and effort, especially when you're working on more complex skills like language or academics.
That's a huge win for ABA professionals.
Absolutely. It allows us to maximize our impact.
It's like building a framework that supports a whole lot of learning to happen automatically.
A great way to put it. And this approach can be particularly helpful for people with learning disabilities or developmental delays.
Why is that?
They might need more structured, intensive teaching, and stimulus equivalence-based instruction provides a framework for potentially faster and more generalized learning.
Oh, I see. So instead of just memorizing one specific connection,
Right.
they're developing this deeper understanding of how all these different things relate to each other.
Exactly. And once different stimuli become part of the same equivalence class, a response learned to one member of that class is more likely to occur with the other members, even if you don't directly reinforce it.
So it's like the learning spreads.
It does, it generalizes.
That's so cool. So it's not just rote memorization. It's about building this flexible, adaptable understanding.
That's the goal, to create learning that translates to real life.
This all sounds really valuable, but are there any, challenges or things that ABA professionals need to be mindful of when they're working on establishing stimulus control and equivalence classes?
Definitely. While it's a powerful approach, it's not always easy.
What kind of challenges are we talking about?
One of the big ones is figuring out the most important features of the stimuli that are going to drive those discriminations. We call those the salient features.
Salient features.
Yeah. You got to make sure the learner's paying attention to the right things. Like if you're teaching colors, you want to be sure they're focusing on the color, not the shape.
So you have to present things in a way that highlights those key features.
Exactly. You have to be strategic about it.
And the way you actually set up the teaching sessions must be really important too.
It is. How you arrange the sample and comparison stimuli in MTS, the reinforcement schedule you use,
Oh yeah, the good old reinforcement schedules.
and how you handle errors.
Right. All of that has to be carefully planned.
It does. And then another important thing is making sure that what's learned actually generalizes beyond the teaching setting.
So it's not just about performing well in a contrived environment.
Right. We want the skills to be useful in the real world. Like just because someone can match pictures to words at a table.
Doesn't mean they'll use those words correctly when they're out and about.
Exactly. So you have to actively plan for generalization. Build it into your teaching from the start.
That's a really good point. And then, of course, we have to remember that every learner is different.
Oh, absolutely. That's crucial.
They come with their own unique learning history and preferences.
And strengths and challenges.
Right. So what works for one person might not work for another.
It's about individualization, tailoring our approach to each learner's needs.
So you can't just take a cookie-cutter approach. You have to be flexible and adapt.
For sure. It's both an art and a science.
That makes a lot of sense. It highlights that while these principles are, foundational,
Right.
actually putting them into practice requires a lot of thought and a personalized approach.
It does. It's about using the science of behavior in a creative and individual way.
Okay. Well, this has been a truly deep dive into stimulus control.
It has been quite a journey.
We covered a lot of ground. We went from the basics of simple stimulus control and discrimination to the more complex ideas of concept formation, conditional discriminations.
Matching to sample, stimulus equivalence.
It's a lot to take in, but Hopefully, you, our listener,
Yeah, we hope this has been helpful.
now have a clearer understanding of these essential principles.
And why they're so important for ABA professionals.
It really makes you appreciate all the little ways our environment and experiences shape our actions, often without us even realizing it.
It's like a hidden language that's constantly influencing us.
So here's something to think about. How might a better understanding of stimulus control help you recognize those subtle influences on your own habits and reactions?
It's a good question to ponder.
Like, think about your day-to-day life. Are there any sights, sounds, or even thoughts that might be guiding your behavior in ways you haven't really noticed before?
It's an interesting exercise to become more aware of those connections
And if you're really interested in diving deeper into these concepts,
and seeing how they're used in practice.
we highly recommend checking out the wealth of information available in ABA literature and resources.
There's so much out there to explore. It's a constantly evolving field.
Well, thanks for joining us for this deep dive. Until next time, keep those brains buzzing.
Keep learning and keep applying these concepts to your own lives and work. It can make a real difference.
We'll see you next time.
Bye for now.